Hello, hello, citizens of the world. Shaba Shem's here with Around Our Table pod show as we continue to talk about, different topics related to business and health in an attempt to inspire, empower, and connect the citizens of the world to create success and achieve financial freedom. Today, I have a guest who will just show us and teach us on how to create success and achieve financial freedom through his niche and his operations of cottage food operations. And of course, he is the founder of Forrager. Yes, so David Crabill is here with me. Welcome, David. How are you?
Thank you so much, Shaba, for having me.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure. So I've been a follower of your blog and everything you have out there with the podcast as well, and a huge fan of your work clearly because I have this keen interest in cottage food operations. So before we dive into the industry that you're serving, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, a lot of people want to know how I got into this because I've been doing it for over 10 years now. And I actually started by wanting to sell my own chocolate chip cookies that everyone raves about. Along the way, I've kind of learned that chocolate chip cookies are a pretty hard business to start for a variety of reasons. But I've always had this interest in, kind of having my own business. So in the process of trying to sell my own chocolate chip cookies, my friend and I actually started a website for letting people sell homemade food. And that didn't really take off. But in the process of building that, I built an informational resource that taught people how to start a food business from home, what the legalities were, what their cottage food law is. And in the process of building that started to get some reputation and interest. And so I just kind of followed along with that success, and I have built that up over time. So now that's not only teaches you about your cottage food law, but it's an online community. I now have a website where I have a podcast where I interview cottage food entrepreneurs as well. So it's just kind of grown over time, and it's taken me on a path that I definitely didn't expect, but it's been a very fruitful one.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that. You start a journey and then all of a sudden you find yourself taking a different direction, which is fine. The universe is telling you what you don't know. So the chocolate chip cookies, I'm guessing you are not doing it, right?
No, I actually now sell fudge during the holidays. So fudge happens to be a much more lucrative business opportunity. The
Mhm.
chocolate chip cookies just, have such a short shelf life. They also have very low perceived value, whereas fudge has a much longer shelf life, a much higher perceived value. The only downside with fudge is that it really only sells well during the holidays, but that's fine for me. I'm fine with it being just a seasonal business.
So when you talk about the difference in terms of shelf life, so is this something that you would recommend that cottage food operators look into, a longer shelf life? And what are we talking about between the chocolate chip cookies and the fudge? What's the distinction in shelf life there?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend to people in, the lessons that I teach that they should be aware of some of the pitfalls or the downsides of certain types of products. So having a low perceived value would be a big one. Having a short shelf life would also be a big one. And just because a product has a pitfall doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't sell it. It kind of depends on the demand, the price. But, once enough of these kind of pitfalls add up, then it doesn't really become a good business opportunity. And so chocolate chip cookies just happen to have like all the pitfalls. So they're very generic. They're, have a low perceived value. They have a very short shelf life, like a day or two. And so it's just really hard to start a chocolate chip cookie business. And I would actually say that's changing. I think that cookies are becoming kind of the next fad, but you see that happening with a much higher priced cookie where, like a $4 cookie that's very large and heavy and dense. and delicious. And mine were just like normal average size. So yeah, I definitely was smart to move away from that business idea early on.
So I always thought that a man who actually is in the kitchen cooking is pretty sexy, and a man who can bake is even more sexier. Something about like a man in an apron, like dealing with dough and flour is really irresistible. But this question precedes actually the cookies and the shelf life. Why? How did you even get into baking? I mean, it's not something that a regular, young man would be doing. So how did you even get into it? Which is pretty hard, by the way.
I don't know about that. I mean, we always baked growing up. We also made fudge growing up. I don't know. It was something that my brother and I did a lot, was just make chocolate chip cookies. We became known for them in some ways. We sold them at garage sales when we had garage sales. So uh, I don't know if it's that uncommon. Maybe it's something that men kind of move out of. I don't know if that's societal pressures or whatever as they go into college and get a
Yeah.
job. And to be fair, I wasn't necessarily doing a ton of baking at that point in my life, but it was always something that I had thought about doing. And then I remember bringing the cookies to an event. I think it was actually a Super Bowl party. That's very in line with what I think the Super Bowl is this coming weekend. But somebody said like, "Oh, these are amazing cookies," and so I thought, well, maybe I should start selling them, and that would be fun. But there's actually more young men who get into these kind of businesses than you might think.
Well, this is where I think I need to give you like a little bit introduction to cultural diversity 101, because where I come from, it's very rare to find or catch a man in a kitchen. In fact, not many do it. That's why coming from North Africa with the Muslim upbringing, it's not something that is common to men. So this is why I commend all men that are out there who, participate in the cooking and baking and kind of just like putting food on the table, because I believe that it shouldn't be a woman's role in the family or society, especially that nowadays women contribute to financial independence and so on. So they bring the money as well. So why limit the tasks of the cooking and the baking to women? So that's why in my culture where I come from, it's not something that is common, as you
Oh,
mentioned.
I mean, I definitely understand that. I mean, I used to date someone who was born in Mexico,
Yeah.
and definitely within her culture, it was not common for men to be in the
Oh,
kitchen.
yeah. Yeah.
And I would say overall, with cottage food entrepreneurs, the vast majority are women. I'd say probably at least 75% are women. So that's definitely true, but there's still a lot of men out there. And I guess I'm in like the modern man era, because like in our family, my wife does pretty much no cooking, and she just never has, and so I kind of fulfill that role. So, I agree with you that we don't need to necessarily limit ourselves based on the gender lines.
Yeah, and that's why we need actually to celebrate all the men out there who are stepping in these new roles, modern roles, as you call them, because they are much appreciated by us women who see like our husbands come in and making a lunch or dinner or baking something. So we do appreciate that. So to all the men out there who never go in the kitchen, if you really want to be appreciated for more than just like the regular tasks you do, try to make something for your wife or your spouse. She would be appreciative of that. So let's get back to cottage food operations and industry as a whole. So you got into it probably by the way things just worked out for you, and then now you're building this ecosystem, these services to help the cottage food industry. So if somebody wants to get started, like step by step, what would you give them as advice based on your experience and the many cottage food operators that came into your pod show? What would be phase one, step two? What would you give them in terms of step by step stage?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing that I recommend is that people try to get started and get feedback as soon as they can. I see a lot of cottage food entrepreneurs really get caught up in sort of overthinking their business. They try to figure out their recipes and they try to figure out all the legalities and the permits. And I think a lot of people who are brand new entrepreneurs don't realize that you don't start to learn what you really need to be selling or how you should be selling until you start getting feedback from real customers. So I definitely try to guide people into getting to their first sale as quickly as possible. I do have a free mini course that I offer, and that walks you through like a 7-day course that, I tried to think about, okay, what's the most essential things that somebody needs when they're starting a business, like if they have no idea what they're doing, day one, day two. So that's definitely kind of a complex question to answer in a short time frame here, but I do have a free course that you could find at cottagefoodcourse.com, and that will walk you through all of the steps that you need to take to learn what it takes to be a cottage food entrepreneur.
And what's the cost of the course, and what would it take for people to register? Just cottagefood.com, and then what else?
Cottagefoodcourse.com. It's totally free.
Oh, okay. So that's 7 days, right? They should have like the step by step in 7 days of what they need to. And you talk about feedback, right? So does the feedback precede the sales? Or is the feedback part of the sales?
Yeah, I think I do recommend that people get some feedback before selling. You can kind of get some feedback, but I think the real feedback comes after you make sales. So, I walk through this whole process of how to, kind of launch your business and start getting some feedback. But you really need to get feedback from people who are actually shelling out money for it, because everybody thinks your product's amazing when it's free, right? It's when you actually start to sell it that you start to understand, is there really demand for this product in my area? Or what kinds of products are in demand in my area? What price point should I be selling at? That all comes from the selling process. And I find that a lot of cottage food entrepreneurs are just really, there's definitely some fear there. There's fear of kind of putting yourself out there, stepping outside your comfort zone. And so typically, like most things, once you just jump in and step into starting to sell, then everything becomes easier. And so I try to prevent cottage food entrepreneurs from delaying that process as much as they can.
And where would you recommend they get these first sales? Where should they be stepping into?
Generally, the process that I recommend, it depends on, what the person is selling and, what their area looks like, what their market looks like. But I generally recommend just, kind of using your own local space, definitely focusing on local sales. A lot of people say, I want to sell on Etsy, or I want to be able to ship across, across the state. Most people don't start there. You want to start with the local area, your local connections. Typically, I'd be reaching out to anywhere I already have a connection. So that might be my church, or that might be an activities group that I'm in, or that might be, my child's sports teams, or so anywhere that you already interact with people consistently, including family and friends. That's a good place to start. And then letting word of mouth spread a little bit. And once you start to put yourself out there, and if you have a decent product, which you probably do, people will start to notice you. People will start to take interest in it. And you just have to kind of have a framework for getting yourself out there and getting your name out there.
So I read one of your blogs where you talk about, I think it was an answer to a question, if I'm not mistaken, where somebody was asking exactly about that, like the permits and the licenses, and should I do this and that? And your advice was like, try at least to do a concept testing first. Make sure that people, are interested in the product. So is it something that you think should come before the licenses and registrations? Like, okay, I have this amazing cake or brownie or whatever. Are people even going to buy it before I even go into the hassle of, the kitchen and the setup and the paying the registration? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say my thoughts are a little counter to what you might hear elsewhere online. I do think that it's important to test a concept first, just because I've definitely gone down the rabbit hole of like trying to set up a business before without testing it with customers, and then find that, nobody really wants what you're trying to make, or it's not as amazing as you thought it was, or it's too hard to create, or not profitable enough, whatever it may be. It's kind of a balancing act. So it depends on the state. Some states it's so easy to get started. Literally the registration. there might not be any registration
Yes,
process,
no,
or
there's
maybe the
no.
registration process is something you can do online in a few minutes.
Yeah,
And so in those cases, if it's going to take like a day to set up your business legally, I say go for it. There are
yeah,
other states where it's really complicated to do. And also, in tandem with this, a lot of people don't even know that it's illegal to sell homemade food, and they just sell it,
yeah.
and it works. And that's how most cottage food businesses actually get started, is that people just make a cake for their son's birthday, and then other moms see it and they say, hey, can you make one for my son's birthday? And then they do it. They don't even know it's illegal. It's so common. There's almost like no fees or penalties for
Right.
that, because you might, if anybody reported you, may have the health department call you up and say, hey, that's not really legal. This is what you have to do to get yourself licensed. There's not many repercussions for going the illegal route when you're really, really small. So I'm actually not so opposed to, not following all of the legalities if you're working, if you have to have the right motive, right? If you're working to test out a business concept and okay, if this works, if I make $500 of sales, then I'm going to go get the permit. I'm going to go get the license. As long as you have the right motive, I
Right.
think it's okay, because what I see is a lot of people who fall into this business idea, they go through the license, they go through the permit, they get an LLC, they get insurance, and then they discover, hey, this isn't even something I enjoy doing. It's not something I even like, they want to keep doing. They've just wasted all this money and time on something that could have easily been avoided if they just tested it out a little bit for a month or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a podcast and you interview cottage food operators, and you probably notice some common denominators of those who are being more successful than others. So what would you think is the most I don't know, stepways or pathway for the success of a cottage food operation? And how does that success manifest itself? Is it like, okay, I have built this CFO, now I'm successful, I'm going to go into a brick and mortar or build a company? Or how does a CFO that is scaling manifest its success?
Yeah, I mean, a cottage food entrepreneur and operation, I feel like, has a lot of different motives. There's a lot of reasons why someone might become a cottage food entrepreneur, right? Maybe they want to jump into a brick and mortar store. Maybe they just want it to be a hobby in retirement. Maybe they want a little bit of extra spending money, a little bit of extra income. Maybe they really want to work from the home, so that's more important than having a full-scale commercial bakery.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different reasons, and they're all valid, right? So I think, what makes a cottage food entrepreneur successful is highly dependent on who they are and what their motives are for starting the business. I mean, success takes a lot of different forms, and there's no form that's necessarily better than another, depending on the person. I don't know if you listened to episode 51 of my podcast, but I did talk about like the top 8 traits that I've noticed with my podcast guests so far. They're all pretty successful. And so one of the big things I notice with these types of entrepreneurs that really like to serve people, often that comes in the form of having already done some kind of food service industry work. Also, they tend to be like really consistent and hardworking individuals. So they're willing to put in the time, show up every week at a market or do something like that. There's a few other ones that I outlined, but I noticed traits and trends in different entrepreneurs, but I also think that a lot of these traits can be developed over time. As somebody steps into a business, I think the business can change you for the better, and allow you to more better realize your full potential.
So some of the cottage food operators that I've known, at least in my circle, in my community, is that they do a lot of different things, right? Like they have I don't know, product that have a shelf life of 2 days because it have this crème pâtissière and it needs refrigeration, and then up to food, and I feel a little I don't know, exhausted just seeing the amount of product they produce. And for me, I might be wrong, for a cottage food operation to be more or less successful, variety is not the best, your best way to go. It's more focused on few products with, like you said, longer shelf life with a bigger margin. and then you can mass produce and then sell. I mean, what are your thoughts? What would you tell somebody who's making everything versus somebody who would focus on two to three things? Because this is a conversation we need to have for cottage food operators, to understand the business, because lots of them, they don't even understand or know what they don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one because obviously we hear a lot of how you should niche down on your business. You should simplify your menu. And if you look at the most successful cottage food businesses, they generally do just that. They tend to niche down on specific products and focus on that. And that's where they can go really big with their business. However, I will say one of the traits that I've noticed with a lot of cottage food entrepreneurs is they like to please people. They like to say yes to things.
Yeah.
And typically a cottage food entrepreneur, when they're getting started out, they're trying to build a reputation. They're very flexible. They're willing to say yes to anything. You know, hey, like one of my very recent guests, like people are asking about, hey, do you make hot cocoa bombs? Sure, we make hot cocoa bombs. They never made a hot cocoa bomb in their life. But I think that trait is, you know, that desire to please, that desire to serve is what allows entrepreneurs to move forward in their business, and is what allows them to become successful. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if someone likes to like make everything, but I think eventually, again, it depends on their motive, right? Like somebody might like having that kind of business where they do everything, and it maybe limits the size of their business or it limits their ability to scale, but the business is the right size for them. But I think for the kind of cottage food entrepreneur that wants to maybe move into a brick and mortar or scale up their business to be, you know, a bigger brand, they're probably eventually going to learn that they need to simplify their menu. They need to focus on what they're really, really good at, and that allows them to grow.
Along this line, what do you perceive as the biggest challenges of this industry?
Oh, that's a big generic question. Yeah, the biggest challenges for the cottage food industry, I think, I don't know. Is there a certain angle you want me to focus on there?
Any angle you want.
Yeah, I mean, I
you
would
have
say
you have the big picture. You've been doing it for 10 years. So what do you perceive is the challenges or the missing parts that are not there?
uh-huh. I mean, one of the challenges I think for the cottage food industry in general is just that it's kind of still largely unknown. A lot of people don't know that cottage food laws exist. And for an individual baker or cook, definitely a challenge with the laws is just the limitations that come from them. So a lot of people jump in and they want to make cheesecake, and then they find, oh, their state's law doesn't allow them to make cheesecake. There's a variety of limitations there. Also challenges in just running a home bakery. I mean, if you're running a family, and then you're trying to run a home bakery on top of that, sometimes it can look a little chaotic, right? And there's definitely been a lot of podcast guests of mine that have said looks like their home exploded with everything, with all their baking supplies everywhere. Yeah, there are a variety of challenges. I mean, I think that with the challenges though, it's kind of part of the process. You know, there's limitations with the cottage food industry because you're starting small. A lot of the bakers are not making that much money when they're starting out, but that's the benefit of the cottage food industry, is it gives people a much easier path to test out their product idea, to get started, so that they don't have to invest so much time and effort and money into starting a commercial bakery that could cost tens of thousands of dollars and never pan out.
Absolutely. So for the chaos of running a business from your kitchen, especially when you have a family and so on, there are alternatives such as, and I want to kind of pick up your brain here and your thoughts on certified kitchens that you can be using, or commercial certified kitchen you can rent out. And I believe that in every community there is the community centers, and most of them do have some rooms they rent out, and they have a commercial kitchen attached to it. And it's rather inexpensive to get a room like that. And also an idea that I actually just heard of recently, and it's co-packers. So if you have a product that you can manufacture, especially with a longer shelf life, you probably cannot do it with cookies or something like that that last a week. but something that has a longer shelf life, because now you're mass producing through a co-packer, and then you just focus on selling either on a website or in your community, church, mosque, farmers markets, your neighbors, door to door. I mean, just make it happen, right? But you have the quantity. I want to see your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so as you talked about commercial kitchens, certified kitchens, that would be the most common way to run a food business. That would, take away all the limitations that a cottage food law would have, like being able to ship interstate. You'd be able to ship interstate, on Etsy or something if you were using a commercial kitchen. For a lot of cottage food entrepreneurs, it just doesn't even become an option anymore to use their home kitchen if their business is growing. They just max out of their kitchen space or their kitchen capacity. And moving into a commercial kitchen is like way more scalable. They can produce so much more product in a such much shorter time frame. And certainly that is like a natural next step for someone who has a growing and budding cottage food business. And they'll just eventually be pushed into it if they don't jump into it sooner because they want less restrictions. Like if they wanted to sell that cheesecake, for instance. As far as co-packers, it's definitely an appealing idea to a lot of cottage food entrepreneurs at first, because it's like, hey, it's a lot of work to produce food. I mean, it's a lot of work to produce so much food. And it's like, oh, I could just have a co-packer make it all for me, and then I just have to sell it. And so there's definitely this appeal there. Realistically, a co-packer is not really a great option for most cottage food businesses because co-packers have order minimums. So you're going to have to be producing like 1,000 units of your product or something like that. So it would only be at the point in which you're already selling a lot, you have a like thriving business, and you can, handle the order minimums and know that you have the audience and you have the community to be able to sell that much product in a reasonable time frame. It's only at that point you look at a co-packer. Also, challenges with the co-packer that you are going to have to change your recipe to some degree. Like you have to use their ingredients. They're not going to be, buying special things just for you. So they're using some kind of distributor and bringing in certain ingredients. And so there's going to be an adaptation there for the ingredients, and then also the recipe process and the process of making your product is going to have to work with their equipment. So oftentimes a product will actually change to some degree, and oftentimes not for the better. And so there's definitely a downside there. But at some point, when I would say if a cottage food entrepreneur has really had a thriving product-based business that had a long shelf life item like salsa, for instance, the co-packer would be a good idea, but you'll know when you get to that point, right? You'll be, making $10,000 a month or something like that.
Yeah, I had to mention it as an option because sometimes people drown when they don't know what options they have. And anyone who starts a cottage food operation and it's working well and it's doing well, they need to understand that the next level is not, oh my God, I have to now to open a brick and mortar business. No, you can still get a commercial kitchen, you can find a co-packer, you can, whatever it is. I mean, there are options before really thinking about investing thousands and thousands of dollars when especially you're not ready. And I, my heart goes out to the families who have little kids. And even if their business or the CFO is working well, they still don't want to leave and do a brick and mortar. So providing them with options, I think, then they feel better about the decisions they can make, moving forward. David, what are you working on that is exciting to you right now?
Well, one thing I'm working on is I have this new premium membership on my website. So as I mentioned, I have this free course I probably shouldn't be free. It's quite detailed, and it guides people through the initial steps of getting their business off the ground.
And what's the course again? It's Cottage?
It's cottagefoodcourse.com.
Okay.
That'll take you to the right page. But then I also have premium lessons on my website. So and there are actually some free lessons as well. If somebody signs up for a free Forrager account, they can learn how to build a website, how to set up email marketing, things like that. But then I also have premium lessons on top of that. So the mini course kind of walks you through the stages of launching your business. It walks you through a framework of getting your business off the ground, using a launch process and learning the legalities, learning how to pick your products, learning how to price your products, things of that nature. And then the premium lessons currently focus more on the legality side of it. How do you get your permits? Should you get an LLC? Should you get business insurance? Should you set up a business bank account? How do you do your taxes? How do our sales taxes work? How do income taxes work for a business? So those things that I think are kind of a later stage steps for a business when they know this is something that they really want to pursue. That's where my premium lessons come in. And so I'm kind of in the very early stages of building that premium membership out. And that's an exciting project I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your vision for the future, where do you see yourself?
Well, yeah, so I currently have, my podcast where I am interviewing cottage food entrepreneurs that's growing and providing a lot of value to the community. I certainly have the website where I teach people about their law and about how to get started. And then for the future for me, it's right now about this membership, kind of building up this membership into a product that can provide a lot of value for people who want to take the next step in their business. They want to get off the ground, because a lot of cottage food entrepreneurs that reach out to me, people reach out to me every single day, and most of them, they just don't know where to start. They don't know how to get their business off the ground. They're confused, and it is confusing. It's really confusing if you haven't jumped into a business before, or even if you have. So there are things that are specific to the food industry. So I'd like to get to the point where I can walk someone through that process and give them the support that they need, so that they can, make a difference in their family, make a difference with having the business they always dreamed of, being able to start a business that takes them into the brick and mortar they always dreamed of. So that's where I want to be. I wouldn't say I'm quite there yet, but I'm definitely working towards that goal.
And we're looking forward to it and see your vision happen and come together, and anything we can do to support you. Of course, we are here. We have a good community that can stand behind you, because honestly, the force of good is simply amazing. And the reason I feel strongly about cottage food operations, like early on when I came to the States, probably 2 years or 3 years after I was here, my English was still terrible. I was in Illinois and I wanted to start a catering business. And I was told, actually, the only way I can do it is to have a certified kitchen. And dumb, stupid me, I went and I spent thousands of dollars building from scratch a certified kitchen, and I got all the permits. And I started this catering business, but I was in wholesale. And needless to say, that wholesale doesn't cut it when you're like selling North African pastries that nobody knows about. And then, of course, it started to pick up a little bit, a very, very hard business. But end of it is I stopped it because I was raising 3 kids, going to school, working another part-time job. It was just like too much. And I knew at the time that learning the language, getting an education, being a new immigrant was my priority. So I had to shut it down. And that was a huge loss, like thousands, like we're talking $50,000, $60,000. So that's why now when I decided to come back and support the cottage food operator, I want to tell them that there are options. There are options before you start spending money. Like you say, just start small and little, test your product, test your market, and stop having these big dreams that sometimes are unrealistic, I would say, or unrealistic, and they make a hole in your bank account. Work smart. That's all I'm saying. So I really appreciate all that you're doing. I wish I had met you. I wish I had met you like 25 years ago or 24 years ago when I decided to get into the food industry, which I am super passionate about. You would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of money. So thank you so much for what you do, David. And any last advice for cottage food operators out there?
Well, that was an amazing story, Shaba. And, I don't think that the cottage food laws really existed back then. So I don't know if I could have helped you too much. I
mean, you're probably too young.
Yeah.
How old were you? Like 25 years ago, you were probably, what?
Like 8, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But a version of
So
David.
yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, talking about options, I would say most people they go through the process of starting in their home and staying in their home as long as they can. That generally works the best. And then when it becomes too painful, they move into a commercial kitchen that they don't own, they rent it, and that takes a lot of the pain out of making the product. And then from there, they might move into, creating their own commercial kitchen or something like that, or maybe going a co-packer route. But that's generally the typical process. But if somebody wants to learn about their cottage food law, they can just go to Forrager.com. I have a whole map there that shows people how their state ranks and what they can do to set up their business legally. As I said, cottagefoodcourse.com is also a really great starting point. And in lesson 2 of that course, I do walk you through how to read through your state's law and learn about that as well.
So, would it be okay with you if I took the cottage food course and translated it for the people from my community? Because lots of them they don't speak English, as I'm finding out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with that. It is a video course though, so I guess it would have to put captions on the video or something like that, because it's not a written course. It's just a set of videos where I walk people through, and they have slides too, which also would probably be hard to translate. So it might not be the most feasible thing. It's also quite an extensive course, so that would be a pretty big undertaking. I'd say there's about 6 hours of course material in there. So
well, but here you go. You're talking about expanding your membership platforms and your courses. Looking into different languages might not be a bad idea, because a lot of the cottage food operators actually they do not speak English, and they need to work from home because of that limitation. So
oh yeah, I'm getting there. But I have to have a functioning business model before I can grow beyond what I'm doing right now.
Yes, absolutely.
It's taking it one step at a time.
Absolutely. And like I said, we're definitely here rooting for you, supporting you with anything we can do for you, David. Thank you so much for your time, for being here. And here you have it, guys, another episode of Around Our Table Pot Show with Shaba. I hope I can see you on another episode as we continue to inspire, empower, and connect citizens of the world to create success and build financial freedom. Love you all, and I will see you on the next one. And salam.